Kia ora, welcome. If we haven't met, my name is Aaron, and it's a good day to be alive, isn't it? It's probably a good day to be dead as well, but, I haven't experienced that, so we'll go with it's a good day to be alive, and hopefully you can join us at the park. I'm sorry, my laptop's just under all my stuff down there. That would be amazing. Thank you. Hopefully you can join us at the park after the service. And also, if you're new, can we have that Connect area slide up? If you're new, we would love to meet you in the Connect area after the service. So we just have a special space out there that's designed to connect with you there. So we would love to do that after the service. And so last week, we were talking about New Year's and how we have this phrase, which is New Year, New You. And we talked about how often that's like the slogan of a gym, right? Like they're like, hey, New Year, New You. And probably what they usually find is that means New Year, you sign up and then they never see you, right? But they've got the 3-month subscription. And so about February is the best time to buy a gym membership because everyone's selling theirs that they bought in January and discovered they weren't going to use, and they're locked into a contract. And so sometimes we've actually found it's New Year, same you, right? Or depending on how Christmas and New Year's went, it's New Year and there's a little bit more of you, but there's the same you, right? And, we talked about how New Year's resolutions so often aren't that fashionable anymore, right? In the 90s, everyone did New Year's resolutions. They say statistically, if you did do a New Year's resolution, we've already passed quitting day. So if you're still doing it, you are statistically in the top %, because I think quitting day is about the 8th or something like that of January of when people quit New Year's resolutions. But it's perhaps more popular or in vogue these days to have a word for the year, like abundance, or my year is freedom, or, I've got a word for the year. And I guess New Year's do give us hope that maybe something is going to change and maybe something will be different. And we kind of declare in faith it's going to be a great year. And, I really hope it is a great year for you. But sometimes we look for something new, don't we? Like as human beings, we love the idea that there would be something new. I mean, the Christian version of the word for the year is, we get a prophetic word from a prophet for the year. And I'm not against that per se, but what I do realize is that many times God is doing different things in all of our lives. So to have one prophet say, hey, here's the word for 2025, probably what you'll find is if you look far and wide enough, you'll find one that fits you. And so you can choose, wow, I love this one, and this is going to be me. And sometimes we are waiting and we are looking for something new. But sometimes what we actually need to do is hold on to the old rather than pursue something new. There's that saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But that's only true if you're doing the wrong thing. See, some things actually have to be persisted with before the fruit comes to be. And sometimes we are so keen for something new that we forget that we actually need to hold on to the old. And in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's this Hebrew word, and if we can have that slide up for hesed, there's a Hebrew word that actually is translated the steadfast love of God. And so it's talking about the love of God that does not shift, it does not change, it is there and it is steadfast. steadfast through every season. And we may not know what 2025 holds, but we can know what is going to hold on to us, and that is the love of God. So sometimes we're so wondering, what's the year going to hold? But the reality is this: for some it's going to be an amazing year, for some it's going to be a hard year, but for all of us there is an invitation to live in the steadfast love of God that does not change. And so Paul wrote in Romans 8, "Now in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor things present nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." So here Paul writes and he says, hey, there is this love of God, and there is absolutely nothing that can separate you from it. Whatever you think might be the thing that's going to separate you from the love of God, he's like, there is nothing in all creation that can separate you from God's love. It's interesting that he starts by saying, I am persuaded. See, it was something that he had to come to that point of living in this reality that he was persuaded by the love of God. How would 2025 be for you if you lived 24/7 assured of God's love towards you? When we live assured of the love of God, everything changes. I remember when Sarah and I first started dating, I wouldn't say maybe she didn't quite love me yet. The charm hadn't reached its full. But, we were dating, and she said yes to a date, so that was good. And I used to work with a friend of my sister's. I worked at the Inland Revenue. Jesus liked tax collectors, so I thought, hey, why not get in on a little bit of that action? I found out not many other people do, but I was working at Inland Revenue, and I actually worked with a friend of my sister's. And my sister came up to me one day and said, she kind of said it like a bit of, with a little bit too much surprise in her voice. She said, have you got a girlfriend? Like it was something strange is going on. And I was like, well, yes, but I'm like, but how do you know? Because there was no way I was telling my older sister that I had a girlfriend. And she's like, oh, Shona, who works with you, she could just tell. And I was so angry. I was like, what do you mean she could tell? Oh, she just asked me because the way you walk around the office is different. I'm like, shut up, it's not. And I remember I was so flippin' angry that I thought here I was cool, calm, collected, but obviously I was some soppy, mushy, love-struck young man. And, that maybe wasn't even love. I was maybe just had some positive human affirmation. Don't you love that as a romantic way of describing the early days of our relationship? Probably guys don't describe the early days of your relationship as positive human affirmation. Sarah did well, didn't she? But I remember being so angry that I had not been as cool, calm, collected as I wanted to be, but I could not help but live in some way projecting differently because I had someone's acceptance. And can I say this morning, when we talk about the love of God, God's love is not primarily actually a romantic love. It's actually a self-sacrificial love. It is love in far greater measure than just to be defined in romantic terms. So if you're here and you're like, man, he's speaking on the love of God. I don't want to think about butterflies in my tummy and those kind of things. Like, I'm a man, what's going on? Like, we're talking about a love that actually all of us were created to live in. It's greater than just a romantic love. It's actually a self-sacrificial love. And if we bring that Hesed description up again, it says this: a sense of love and loyalty that inspires merciful and compassionate behavior towards another person. That is God's heart towards us. That is what God wants us to live in. And so I'm really quickly going to look at one of the strange stories in the Old Testament. We won't go very deep into it this morning. We'll just kind of skim over it. It's probably an Old Testament story that could have been an episode of Jerry Springer if Jerry Springer was around then, because it's a little bit freaking weird with some family dynamics, just saying. So, what happens is Abraham has a promise that he's going to have a son. And so Sarai, his wife, is barren. And so after a while, she decides that a good idea would be for her husband to sleep with her maid, right? So, some parts of my family are dysfunctional, particularly the extended family I'm talking about. But I like reading this because it makes my family look normal. And so she's like, hey, why don't you sleep with my maidservant, and that way you can get pregnant. And so he's like, okay. And so he goes and does it, and she gets pregnant. And then Sarah's all of a sudden like, oh, I was fine with it in concept. Now that it's happened, I'm actually a little bit angry towards her. And so she goes to Abram and says, hey, I'm not that happy with her anymore, and I would like to start mistreating her. And Abram in Genesis 16:6 says, behold, your servant is in your power, do to her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. I mean, I'm making light of it, but this is a horrible story, right? You can imagine the words that would be used in today's language to describe this, like the power imbalance, the manipulation, the bullying. This is a toxic situation in every sense of the word. And so in the end, Sarah is like, she's being mistreated. Hagar's being mistreated. And she's like, I've got no other option. I'm just going to flee. It's kind of like that song, should I stay or should I go? It's like neither option is good. If I stay, there'll be trouble. If I go, it will be double. She's going into the desert. So she is fleeing into the desert. It's not like there was a good option for her. It wasn't like she could go and get on the emergency benefit and maybe get a few weeks and get an accommodation provided for her. She's literally fleeing, walking through the desert. And she comes to this place where there's a pool, and it says that the angel of the Lord comes to her and finds her and says, what are you doing? Where are you going? And she says, I am fleeing from my mistress, Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. Now, we're not going to unpack that this morning, why the Lord said that. If you want to know the theological implications of that, come and see Nathan after the service. He'll explain to you exactly why God told her to return to a toxic situation. He's done a dissertation on it, and he'd love to share that with you in point. So we won't go into that this morning because Nathan's really a resident expert on that. So the angel of the Lord said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said, behold, you are pregnant, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. Okay, the next words I want you to understand are old covenant prophecy, not new covenant. Please do not approach any pregnant ladies and tell them that their son shall be a wild donkey of a man. Even if you're feeling that, just pray it. Don't share it. You can pray against it. But the angel of the Lord comes and she's like, hey, he shall be a wild donkey of a man. Not really what you want as a prophetic word over your child, right? And he shall dwell over his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God of seeing. For she said, truly I have seen him who looks after me. And then she goes on to call the well the same name, after the God who sees. This is interesting because it's actually the first time, and some would say, it depends on how you interpret different scriptures, but some would say this is the only time that a person actually gave God a name. Like God revealed his name many times, but this is the one time where a person actually named God, and it's El Roi, the God who sees me. And so here there is this Egyptian slave who is being mistreated, who is now pregnant with her master's child. Like, you can imagine the level of dysfunction. You can imagine how she feels. And then in the midst of that, she has an encounter with God and all of a sudden realizes that God is the one who sees me. And she realized she was not saying, hey, God's the one who sees me. He sees how wicked I am. He sees my mistakes. He sees that. No, she was seeing the God of compassion. 2025 looks different when we live under this revelation that God actually sees us. David continued this theme. In Psalm 17, he used this phrase where he said, keep me as the apple of your eye. And this word, the apple of your eye, it's actually a beautiful word picture. What it really means is it's the reflection of another in your eye. So it is as God's looking at you, it is your reflection in the eye of God. That God is looking at you with compassion, with grace, with love towards you. And it is like you are the reflection in God's eye. I read this passage in Genesis 16 probably about a month ago. And I was actually just I was having a bad few days. And I remember just realizing in the midst of it, wow, God, you see me. Like, you actually see me. Yes, I know you love everyone. Yes, it's great, because sometimes we talk about the love of God and it's like, that's great, but he loves everyone, right? And sometimes when we emphasize that he loves everyone, the feeling can actually be, well, it's the same as him not loving me personally because he does everyone. But Hagar had this revelation that God saw her. Jesus continued this thought in Luke 12 where he said, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Why, even the hairs of your head are all numbered. As a bald man, I take offense, but they won't give me a woke version of the Bible, so we'll continue. He doesn't need much counting for mine, but he says, fear not, you are of more value than many sparrows. And here the thought is that intimate things of your life are seen by God. But sometimes we live apart from this reality, don't we? In fact, may I be so bold to suggest, many times we live apart from this reality that we are seen by God and his love is stretching towards us. See, many times we live apart from that for 2 reasons. Number one, we actually have a mindset that if God is looking at us and if God is seeing us, my goodness, he's seeing a lot of rubbish and a lot of things that aren't right in our lives. And we would never pretend that in a humanistic way that we're all wonderful and none of us have issues, right? But at the same time, when God looks at us, yes, he sees that, but he is actually looking at us with his loving kindness, with his steadfast love. Or sometimes we're actually like, I don't want God to see God's love and affirmation for me because I actually want to earn it myself. I actually want to do stuff myself that make me a worthy human. I don't want to just have to receive it from God. I actually want to live it myself. And so here Hagar has this revelation of God looking at her. And that changes everything. You know, I know this morning there will be people online, there will be people here in person that maybe you've come into church this morning and you're actually like, man, I feel like not seen within this church. And my prayer is that it wouldn't be the case for anyone, but I know in this number of people, there'll be people who come in and feel like, man, I'm not seen. And it's something to feel not seen, isn't it? I remember I went to a church in LA, and it was at the end of my sabbatical a couple of years ago, and it was right in the heart of Hollywood. Like, it was an amazing church. I'd followed the pastor there for a number of years, so I was really excited to go to this church. And I remember going, and it's right in the heart of Hollywood, and everyone is beautiful at this church. Like, I remember I was scared to show my teeth because I was like, they'll think we don't have dentists in New Zealand. Because everyone had perfect teeth, like just amazing teeth. I was like, now you're all looking at my teeth and I'm freaking out. But anyway, I was like, man, don't show your teeth. Like, I'm sure they're nudging each other going, they don't have dentists in New Zealand, who knew? Because these people were beautiful. They were beautiful. And also, this was just my experience, not particularly friendly. So I remember I went in, and they, it was an amazing church, and it was cool, and they had you had both hot coffee and cold brew, and I was like, oh, how amazing. So I went and got a cold brew, and then realized, and I kind of looked around, and there's this courtyard, and I'm standing by myself in the courtyard drinking a cold brew, and I'm like, trying not to be that person who's going to come and talk to me, because, sometimes people come into churches and they're like, I'm just looking to see how long it takes someone to come and talk to me. Funnily enough, that kind of repels people. There's kind of an unspoken attitude that it's like, I had someone one time tell me, I timed and it took 6 minutes and 32 seconds for someone to come and talk to me. I'm like, man, they came and talked to you. That's a miracle. If you were projecting that. So I realize I'm standing there, and this is what's going through my mind. I'm like, oh, no one's very friendly. And I'm like, as I'm thinking no one's very friendly, I'm probably projecting anti-friendliness. I'm like, what do I do? And then I'm going around a loop in my head. I'm overthinking it, Mark. It's going round and round. I'm like, what do I do? And I look across, and the pastor, who's famous, well, Christian famous, right? There's a difference between famous and Christian famous. He's Christian famous. But because they're all so cool, not very many people are talking to him, and he's talking to a couple, and he finishes talking to them, and he just walks across, and I'm like, oh, I can get a chance to talk to him. So I thought, hey, hello, and he was so friendly, so nice, so engaging, asked me about New Zealand. I said, oh, I'm so excited to come. I've followed your teaching for years, can't wait to hear you preach. He said, well, I'm actually not preaching this morning, and I'm like, oh, well, at least the people are friendly. And so I went in and sat down, and I'm sitting by myself, and this guy comes up, and he is genuinely so friendly. He's got a headset on. He goes, hey, man, would you just mind sitting over one seat? Because I just got a couple of friends. You're by yourself, is that right? Yeah. He goes, could you just slide over one seat? And that would be amazing, because I just got an extra seat for a friend. I was like, sure. And so I slide over one seat, and he'd just been so friendly. And then I turned back around to interact with him, and he's just got his back to me. And he didn't interact with me for the next, service goes through, there's breaks, there's things, and it was there was this ultra friendliness when he wanted the seat next to me, and then as soon as I moved, he was not interested in talking to me at all. Must have been the teeth. And so I remember sitting there actually feeling in a crowd like I was alone. And it was the end of a sabbatical. I'd been traveling away from my family. I was missing the family. I'd been traveling for 2.5 weeks by myself. And I'm sitting in this crowd. I'm all alone with bad teeth, feeling like, wow. As a side note, seriously, I was sitting in the crowd feeling insecure about my teeth. I go and get into the Uber. And the lady says to me, you've got very interesting ears. I said, well, I'm trying to keep my mouth shut. Now do I have to? Without a word of a lie, she goes, I think they're psychic ears. I said, what? I started laughing. And she said, don't laugh. You've got psychic ears. She's being really serious. I just began to laugh. And she said, no, they're psychic. I said, well, could we at least call them prophetic? Probably not going to True story. So one day I felt like need earmuffs, mouth guard, walking around looking a bit different. My prayer is that none of us would feel alone in a crowd. But also, my prayer is that none of us would feel separated from God seeing us and looking towards us. Because when we realize that we are seen by God and His compassion is towards us, everything changes. Some days I'll stop before I go into a meeting and I'll just stop in my car and I'll just be like, God, I just remember that your love is towards me and you see me. So good. Because I found I'm a much kinder person in the meeting if I walk in aware of God's love towards me. Wow, God, I'm so grateful of your love towards me. You see, it's not true that all we need is God's love. No, we need people as well. That's why God said it's not good for man to be alone. But you can have all the people speaking into your life, and we do need that. But there will still be a gap because we were created to live in the love of our Father. How different would 2024 be for us if we lived aware of the love of God in a greater measure? And so the way I actually want to close this morning is by inviting you forward for prayer. And I want to say you don't have to respond. We never want to put pressure on people that they have to respond to something that they're uncomfortable responding to. But what I do want to say is this. I'm not just asking for prayer for someone who says, wow, I feel so far away from the love of God. I'm actually encouraging all of us that maybe we could come forward, be prayed for by a leader, that God would that they would anoint you, that you would live this year with a greater awareness of the love of God. Because I can tell you, I'm certainly having someone lay hands on me this morning because I want to live 2025 with a greater awareness of His love. I want to live, I don't know what the year's going to hold, but I want to hold on to this concept that it's not butterflies in the tummy, it's God's compassion and mercy towards me. And that's what we are created to live in. And that changes everything. Man, if dating someone for a few weeks. Thanks. If dating someone for a couple of weeks and receiving that affirmation can change your disposition in such a way that people notice, what would happen when we walked in step with the love of God? What would happen in our families? What would happen in our workplaces? What would happen in our church if we walked in so aware that He is looking towards us? And so in just a moment, the team are going to pop a song on. And if you don't want prayer, you can just sit and let the words of this song wash over you. But my hope is that many of us will actually be like, God, I want to live with a greater awareness of your love. Even if you feel like you live in the love of God, we can always live with a greater awareness. And so I've asked the elders and pastors to come forward, and they're going to anoint some people with oil and just pray a simple prayer that you would know what it is to live this year in the love of God. Lord, I thank you that your love and your heart is towards us. Lord, I thank you that your love is steadfast. God, so often we are used to love being transactional and dependent on certain circumstances, but thank you that the word describes your love as steadfast towards us. And God, I pray that we would live as people aware of your steadfast love. Awesome. The tech team are just going to pop that song on. And if you want to come forward for prayer as that song plays, that would be amazing.